My dog.
My dog.
I appreciate you coming on here, bro.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Scotty Too Hottie, the man, the myth, the legend.
Stop.
Yeah, bro. Seriously though, I'm so excited to have you on here. It's just funny how we've known each other for the time that we have, but it really wasn't until super recently that I was like, man, I need to have Scott on an episode. So I truly appreciate you coming on, and am so excited to just give you another platform to impact.
Of course. I appreciate it. No, thank you. And similarly, it's like less than a year, like not that, maybe.
Probably about a year by this point, yeah.
Yeah, not long, but kind of thick energy at this point. So
Yes, sir.
I'm glad it is what it is.
Me too, bro. So how was the day?
It was good.
Good?
Yeah. Got the run in. Well, it wasn't the surf and turf crew.
Yeah.
But I actually surf and turfed myself.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was good. Full day. Kids are good. Still off school, so we're summer vibing.
In the thick of that.
Correct. High summer.
Yeah.
High summer.
What's been the most recent activity of choice that the kids are loving?
Tennis.
Tennis?
Yeah. Shout out Breakpoint on Netflix. Because honestly, they found the show, and I think we bought rackets and balls that day. And because there's tennis courts everywhere, I just never noticed them.
Right.
Because I'm not looking to play tennis. I'd never played tennis before. But we play a lot of tennis, which is a lot of fun. And it's also, what you were talking about before we started. It's totally new.
Right.
It's not a sport I've ever played, not a sport any of them have ever played. So we kind of get to learn it together, which is, it's been nice. It's been fun.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And how old are the kids?
So 11, 7, and 4. So 2 boys. Christian is 11. Hendrix is 7. Maverick, my daughter, she's 4. She's less into tennis, but she'll come be our ball girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, she comes and vibes with us.
So what has the process of fatherhood been like? At this point, you've been at it for a minute. And, when I went to therapy, one of the things that we discussed was the fact that parents are done no favors for. You and your spouse get pregnant, and 9 months later you're at the hospital. A couple of days pass by when the baby's born, and then they ship you off and say, hey, good luck. What's the process of fatherhood been like? 3 kids now, learning as you go. Like, how's that been for you?
Good question. We got thrown into it. Jenna, my wife, and I, dating at UT at the time, we get surprise pregnant our senior year. And we didn't know if we were going to even have a baby. Whenever we first, we got surprised. We were 21 years old. Mm-hmm. So once we made that decision, that then kind of set in motion a whole bunch of shit. That was really a commitment that led to more commitment, that led to more commitment, and so on and so forth, which in many ways kind of shaped my present reality, which I look back on really fondly. Hard. Definitely hard. Becoming a father in general, very hard. There's only so much planning you can do. Mm-hmm. Because whenever that child gets here, everything that you thought that you knew, everything that the books say, everything that your parents said, all that shit is out the window. And you're really in that jungle yourself, right? Like, obviously, as a man, me going through my experience individually, my wife as a mother, like, those are very different experiences. And especially in relationship. Like, I don't think anything has been as fruitful for our relationship as parenthood has been. Challenging. Very, very challenging. Mm-hmm. But something that is going to lead you to places that you need to go to actually create relationships and realities that you want. So, fatherhood in general for me has been amazing. In fact, I can remember this one specific moment when Christian, this is about 10 years ago. Christian was the first person that I knew that I shared blood with.
Wow.
Because I was adopted. I never knew any biologicals when I was 22 when he was born. So I remember looking at Christian, holding him in my hands like this, like, damn,
Blood.
this is what this is, right? And you know, being an adopted person, like, blood is blood. It's not everything. It's not nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically with my son, very much felt something that I'd never felt before, which was special. Special. Yeah, it's interesting. Notice it touched me now. And it is a journey. You talk about the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Phew, like, you know, fatherhood has been one of the more challenging things for me as well. You know, being able to, you're not going to be good at it, just point blank.
Right.
You're not going to be good at it.
And you were a person who's used to being good at stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Which made it worse, because especially 22-year-old Scott, in many ways, he already knew everything anyways. You know, so you put him in a situation like parenthood or fatherhood where in many ways he's destined to fail. That's really hard.
Yeah.
You know, and yet when you fail big, you know, like you really, let your child down, or you don't handle the situation the right way, you know, how you respond to that. Right. Does that become a pattern? Do you deny it? Do you just own it? You know, like, shit, I did that. Wasn't the right thing to do. I don't want to do it again. I'm not going to do it again.
Right.
But moving forward, which, you know, at this point, a decade in, which seems kind of crazy to say, honestly, probably being a father and the way that I am a father is probably one of the things that I'm most proud of in my whole life.
Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned failure. I feel like failure, it was just opportunities for you to learn and adapt and change, see what worked, see what didn't, but ultimately gave you information that you could use as you continued.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you didn't know blood till 22.
22.
And I feel like, you know, plenty of people base their styles off of their parents, but not knowing blood till 22, I mean, like, what was the context for that situation? Do you know? Did you just, I mean, what's your story? What's the origin of how does that work?
Sure. So, you know, I mean, to most people, I was just like, I'm just an adopted kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was raised on the 18th fairway of a golf course in East Texas,
Mm-hmm.
Lufkin, Texas. Shout out Lufkin. It's with a mom that loved me and with a dad that loved me, both with their limitations. They weren't able to have children themselves, and once they really accepted that, they adopted my brother first, and then they adopted me. And most people think about adoption as this positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
as this good thing, and it is. I'm glad my story is my story, but what is intrinsic to every adoption is abandonment. Even now, like, I'm blessed to, like, know my biological mother and father and family, and, like, frankly have, like, a ridiculously beautiful relationship with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's very rare in that community in general. But, you know, baby Scott, there is abandonment trauma that's the core of that.
Mm-hmm.
Before you can be wanted or adopted or chosen by another family, you have to first be let go of another, which, you know, the day you're born, which is what happened to me, for that transaction to take place is like significant trauma, right? It's referred to as the primal wound, where that, you know, newborn babies need mom. Mom means life, means milk, means food, means life. And so whenever that is broken, there's pain, there's adverse effects. Whereas, you know, in many ways, abandonment was one of the first experiences that I had, which hurts to say. I mean, to this day, it's not a defining experience. It's not the only experience. But undoubtedly, like, that was one of the first experiences I had. So, like, me moving through life, I was predisposed for abandonment, and becoming hypervigilant, and, you know, anxiety and fear, and things of that nature, mostly to protect from another abandonment.
Right.
That's what the primal brain learns. And so it's like, looking at things and becoming aware of things to like make sure that that pain doesn't happen again. So yeah, like the day I was born, I spent the next 5 days in basically like a foster situation in Lubbock, Texas. And then my family, my mom and my dad, flew to Lubbock from Lufkin, and picked me up. Mm-hmm. And then took me back to Lufkin, and I was raised in East Texas. And so for the most part, that my upbringing was beautiful. I think they told me when I was 9. I think I was 9.
Okay.
Hell of a conversation, to be told like, hey, you're I can remember my dad talking in the kitchen to both my brother and I, and he was like, your mom and I didn't give birth to you.
Right.
Which at the time I'm like, what?
You're like,
what?
how?
Like, and I think his exact language was, you were born to another woman, and obviously to another man, another father. And I definitely remember being like, like what?
Right.
What the fuck do you mean? And I think the 2 questions that I asked were, but you're still my mom, right? Which like I can remember being scared,
right,
to even ask that question.
Right.
Like a child has to ask who their mom is. That's that fear, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back and kind of dissecting, reflecting on my own life, my own journey, that moment sticks out a lot. And of course, my mom was like, yes, baby. Like, I'm your mom. I'm always going to be your mom. Like, period.
Right.
Very much reassured me. And I think the next question was like, okay, cool. Can we go now? Like, because
on to the next thing.
We were actually playing, I think, Star Fox or GoldenEye on this N64 back in the day, my brother and I.
Yep.
Which it's interesting to talk about this, like, because I don't think my brother and I have ever talked about that moment. Maybe this will be a catalyst for that, because obviously he and I experienced it together. Mm-hmm. So I'd be because maybe my memory, obviously it's flawed, so
right.
Be interested to see exactly what he remembered, how he remembered it. So aside from that, which I guess I remember going to school the next day. I was in the 4th grade.
Okay.
I'm waiting in line for lunch. My 2 best friends, Matt and Jenna. I tell them, yo, my mom and dad told me I was adopted yesterday. And my homie Matt, being Matt in the 4th grade, was like, bro, no, you're not. They were kidding. They were kidding, which,
right.
He was being playful.
Right, like a 9-year-old.
He was being a 9-year-old or 10 or however. Yeah, we were 9 or 10. Maybe they were 10, but I was 9. And I was like, nah, like for real. Like they told me like they weren't playing. It was for real. Which that was a tough moment as well, because I remember immediately internalizing like, fuck, I guess being adopted is bad. Like,
right.
And I don't know anybody else. Like they were like, wow, you're the only one we know. Like. And of course, there's a whole community out there, like globally, like, but that was an interesting experience as well, like learning, like, okay, this is kind of bad. I didn't know any of that consciously.
Right.
But I can remember the feeling and remember thinking like, and then this is I don't think this is an uncommon experience either. But he was like, I wonder why they didn't keep you,
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think, again, nothing against either of them in this specific 4th grade situation, but part of the conversation was, what if your mom was a hooker, which immediately planted this trailer park, cigarette,
right.
Poverty, like immediately planted that image in my mind, which, meeting my biological mom, I guess 15 years later at that point, that was who I expected to be on the other side of the phone call.
Right.
And just like created shame around it.
Right.
Consciously, probably wasn't aware of any of that shit. But like, again, like as things kind of progressed and, I think what led to a lot of the development of those things in general was my mom that raised me. She ended up passing away when I was 15.
Okay.
So she got cancer when I was 11, battled cancer for 3.5, 4 years, and then eventually died. October 24th, 2005. She actually had a stroke right in front of me, like a devastating stroke. We were in the car together. And, passed away when you're 15 and your mom dies. Obviously that changes everything. It was devastating.
Yeah.
And yet for me as well, like, again, looking back, that's another, like, I lost another mom.
Right.
So this is more of this, it's not just like pure abandonment trauma, but like there is that loss, that rejection, like needing mom. And frankly, like shortly thereafter, I think like a year and a half, my dad effectively fell out of the picture as well. Like, he had just lost his wife of 23 years. And here he is with a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old and my brother and I. And he just really couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
Nobody was perfect in that situation. And I have a ton of empathy for him. Like, I've never experienced that. And everybody responds to things differently. But for me, that was another core abandonment because I didn't have to lose my dad through that experience, but through his behavior, his actions, like that's exactly what happened. And, I ended up moving out of the house. I think I was 17, moved into my best friend's house at the time, Matt Gandy, Matt and Margie, Loretta, Dawn. I'll never forget the day that Margie gave me a key to their house, which, like, feeling like I didn't have a home at the time, which, again, for me, part of that transition was so sharp.
Right.
We lived on the 18th, we live in Crown Colony. We live in the nice neighborhood.
It was nice.
Like everything's taken care of to suddenly, we live on Cherry Street, like basically on the north side of Lufkin, and it's a very different situation. But I chose to be there, and I would have rather been there because there was more home there than there was at this other place at this point. There was more safety. There was, more parents, not like, nobody was ever on my ass, but like we knew when dinner was, and like, there was direction and things like
Structure.
that. Yeah, that otherwise like didn't really exist in my situation now, which was very like, it happened real quick. And looking back at, young teenage Scott in those moments, I have a lot of empathy for, damn, bro, like, no wonder you kind of responded the way that you did. Like, that was hard.
Right.
Like, that was a lot. And, I played basketball.
I was going to ask, through all of this, I can anticipate and assume knowing what you know now, you can look back on all that in a specific way, but in those moments and not really having the wherewithal to dissect down how this might make you respond, how this occurrence might cause you to react to different things, were you like a good kid? Did you have okay grades? Were you just said you were involved in sports, but how did you not just cause hell?
Yeah.
Or did you?
Nah, definitely not. Not hell. We threw a party at our house one time before we moved out, but like that wasn't hell. But yeah, I was a good student. Got good grades, played basketball. I think like National Honor Society.
Yeah.
Who's who. I was even prom king. There's a bit of Scott had a high school hero in there, which, was part of it, which on the real positive side, like gave me shit to do. Right. Really gave me shit to do. And honestly, it's like, one of my intentions for kind of this was like, I hope sharing, or I hope whatever we talk about, like, specifically men, grown ass men, older men, young men, like boys, whatever, like specifically hear and maybe take something. Cause like, to your question, like one of the things that kept me, or the thing that kept me as straight and narrow as I was. I mean, I started drinking when I was a senior, but I like didn't drink until I was a senior.
Right.
And even when I did, like it wasn't crazy. Like I didn't smoke in high school. I mean, there's a lot of things that, a lot of people I know, or like a lot of situations that could have gone super, super left. At my mom's funeral, I didn't even really know Matt Gandy this well when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up becoming best friends, mostly because of this moment, and it was because he reached out to me, and I'll never forget. It was like he stopped me and was like, yo, I know everybody is telling you this shit, but like, if you need anything, like I'm here, like I got you. And I was like, yeah, appreciate it. Cause everybody was telling me that shit. You know? Nobody knew how to react. Like, and he was like, no, like he just emphasized and like wouldn't let it go, which for me eventually, like, cause there are alone moments. It does get quiet. You can go to school and go to practice all you want. Then you come home, your mom's dead. I don't know where my dad is. My brother's 17. He's either there and we're chilling together, or he's off doing his own thing. Mm-hmm. It does get quiet, and I remember finding myself in those moments and then gradually just being drawn toward him. So in hearing that and sharing that, it's like that was an extremely brave thing that he did, because he didn't really know me. Like we didn't really know each other. And frankly, like he played tennis, but like we were kind of in different groups too.
Right.
But the way that he reached out to me and connected with me, like created, like it gave me a place to live. It just created so much guidance. Like frankly, like Matt Gandy and I became like attached at the hip.
Right.
It was like really Matt, and then for me, and then Jenna, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. Mm-hmm. So I share that specifically to your question because like that's why. That's why I didn't create hell. That's why I didn't fall off a cliff. And even like, going through college and then post-college and getting pregnant where things frankly kind of continue downward. The connections around me are what allowed me to still be here, for one, mm-hmm. But also to still be here in a very like powerful way, maybe productive way, like valuable way.
Right.
So really that's how, I mean, like, cause looking back, I had Miss K. Jones. She was a teacher. Again, my girlfriend, Jenna, at the time. Those people that came towards me, because when you're going through moments like that, how do you survive? Especially when you're a kid, It's like
I have no idea.
There's, and in my own experience, the people, like, where there's a lack of that support, a lack of those connections, like, those stories tend to end differently. Right. Whereas with me, yes, there was like a whole bunch of shit, a whole bunch of trauma, but there was also a lot of connection that came toward me and a lot of support that actually allowed me to like, okay, yeah, like I like hooping. I like, this, I like this, like stay here, be focused here instead of, I mean, and again, like going through college as I got older, shit went left. Right. But even, and I think a lot of that was just because when you're in that space and you don't know what to do, you take off running, right? Often in the wrong direction, because you're scared, you're devastated, you're sad, you miss your mom, you miss your dad, like everything that once meant safety and love and family, you mourn for that, you long for that, and yet when those cries, nothing happens, like eventually you adapt, you kind of shut it down, you suppress it, you deny it, and then you start acting a different way. Right. Which was, that was part of the story as well.
Yeah. So would you say, and we'll get more into what you do now, but would you say a big part of why you do what you do is to create safety in safe spaces for men who are feeling some of the things that you mentioned, anxiety, shame, guilt, depression, whatever it may be?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was my experience, so from 17 to, 25, 26, eventually end up there's a lot of important details in there, obviously, but eventually end up in a suicidal place, mm-hmm. where a company I started had failed. I lost a ton of money that I had. My like relationships were I was not available for a relationship, but I mean, I was married with 2 kids at this time.
Right.
But totally, I don't know how to be a dad. Family isn't even safe to me.
Right.
Anymore. Like, I don't even like this, to be honest. And yet, that being my experience and seeing how painful it was for me, who, I mean, pain and trauma aside, like, I did have money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I came from affluence. I came from like a lot of privilege and advantage, to where with that, with a lot of support and connection, I'm a tall white man.
Right.
Society's kind of fucking made for me to succeed, dead ass. Like, it really is.
Right.
And how hard it was for me. Like, I'm an athlete, blah, 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 blah. Prom king, like, blah, 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 blah. I'm all those things. If it was that hard for me, damn, like, all the other men I see, all the other guys, like, everybody's experiencing some level of that same pain.
Right.
Right? Like, and I don't find any value in, like, comparing traumas. Like, you know, everybody's details are different.
Right.
But relatively, the emotional experience is the exact same. Feeling alone, feeling unseen, feeling unsafe, feeling scared or anxious or sad or what have you. We all experience those the same. The environment that causes it is different.
Right.
Yeah, and so for me to, like, have that experience and see all of the surface level advantage and things that I had around me, but still found myself in that place. Yeah, that was okay. Like, like, maybe this is part of why I'm here. And, you know, that's another one thing I found is, like, a lot of people's core trauma, whatever it is, everybody's got something.
Mm-hmm.
Often leads to purpose.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not, you know, obviously it's full of pain. It's kind of simple. When you're open to it and you accept it. So yeah, that was a lot of what led me to, you know, I eventually went to get my master's in counseling to become a therapist, eventually dropped out of that and just started my own executive coaching practice, mostly to reach a guy like me who, like, I didn't want to go to therapy when I first went.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not doing all that. I'm not talking, you know, I wasn't doing all that.
Yeah.
And so kind of becoming a bridge to a lot of healing modalities, a lot of therapy, like, cause, you know, that's who I want. That was who I identified with. So
right.
Like, that's who I wanted to reach out and serve. Yeah. However you want to describe that man, but, like, that's what I did. And that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in hard, but beautiful journey. And you hit the nail on the head so hard by saying that it's simple, but not easy. That's something that's been just on my mind so much lately, is, like, a lot of things, pursuing things that we want. Like, when we know we want something, it's pretty straightforward. Like, go after that. But that doesn't mean the process is going to be just, all right, throw it in the bag and we're going. It's going to require work.
Yeah.
But so for you to get to the place that you're at now, I mean, you finish up at UT. We've talked about this before. I mean, good at pretty much everything you did, whether it be sports. You've been in a long-term relationship, so maybe not spin game necessarily, but, you know, you were just good at what you did. And then you start your career and you are an account executive for some company, right? Now you have your own business, but walk me through, you know, being employed by this corporation first and what that felt like and what the progression was moving to, what's it called? I wrote it down. What was the second company called? Everybody Helping.
Everybody Helping, yeah.
So walk me through that journey a little bit.
Sure. Well, first off, to the spitting game point, like a lot of men, and, you know, for me, it's valuable to share because it's like, you know, I found so much validation in the attention from women.
Mm-hmm.
As a boyfriend and as a husband, like, that was something that, you know, very much I needed, you know, especially with, you know, again, mother wounds or my own abandonment. Like, your own sense of self-worth isn't yours till you make it yours.
Correct. Yeah.
Like, just this cup, you know, it's like I needed women to want me to fill this cup,
mm-hmm.
you know, until I realized, like, exactly what that was. And, like, now my cup is mine. You can't add to it unless I want you to, and you can't take from it unless I want you to. So, Yeah, which like just to quickly touch on that, because
Yeah.
like I mean that's real. Like, and a lot of men are like that. And yet for me, having those experiences and one, like being with a partner who was like committed enough to like see me and like listen and be open to like not just judge and shame and like, you know, judge me for my low moments. But also too, like looking back at myself, like you owned up to that. You called her, you apologized where apologies need to be made. You know, like there was an acceptance of, oh, just like own that piece and move forward.
Right.
Not easy, simple, but not easy. Yeah, which I think for, you know, your audience listening is important to just to touch on. Professionally, I've got a son, you know, and this is at this point, we graduated from UT in Austin, went back to Lufkin, had Christian. We're there for 7 months or so, moved to Houston, and I get a job as an account executive at a company called the Creative Group, which is a company underneath Robert Half, which is maybe the largest technical staffing company in the world.
Yeah.
You know, it was a way better situation that I knew that I was walking into, looking back. You know, I'm rocking a suit and tie to work. There's a big bullpen. You're wearing the headset. You're, you know, making 30 calls a day. You're building a book of business in Houston, Texas, which, like, I mean, shout out Texas in general, but like Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, like there are opportunities that if you actually just put your hands out and do a little bit, like money will come into you. Right? Like, in fact, that kind of happened to me in this situation. Not really knowing what I was doing, my first job out of college. But I knew, I mean, I was married with a son now, so I definitely had this like, okay, like this is what you do now. Right. This is what I do now. And realistically going into that situation, one, I met amazing people. I worked with amazing people. This one dude, Mike Epps. Mike, I love you. I actually saw him this weekend. He and his family. You need to meet Mike. He was a little bit older than me, but he specifically saw me come into the office, kind of just saw me being a young whippersnapper basically. And you know, we worked out a couple times, and eventually I remember being at his place and we were chilling. I think we were watching the Lakers game. Kobe was playing, huge Kobe fan. And he just kind of dead ass switched up on me and was like, yo, don't get to the office at 8 anymore. You know, like you get to the office at 7. Or it might have been 6. Maybe he was like, don't get there at 7, get there at 6. I can't remember, but I just remember being like, oh shit.
He's not playing.
He's not, I'm getting checked right now. You know, like the man, you know, like is telling me like, this is what you do. Right. So for me, that was undoubtedly the most valuable part. And there were several others. There wasn't just Mike, but that was a great office with great people. And that was probably the most important thing I took from that experience. The other part is it went great for, I think, like I was only there for 11, maybe 12 months. And it went great. Like I was good at that. But I remember, you know, and I tell this story in kind of 2 different ways. Generally, I basically just self-sabotage the situation. Okay. Because I remember thinking, life is going too good right now. And again, like through my own past, my own experience, I'm really used to chaos. Right. Like I feel much more comfortable, much more familiar with chaos. And yes, even though like there was a bunch of money that like I had around me, I never knew how to manage money. So like, yeah, even though money was present, like it wasn't like I always felt struggle or need for money because like I was giving it away, throwing it away, spending it, etc. Bad investments, what have you. So after basically crushing it at this job, which like I was really set up to do super well, way better than I expected to, being 23, really my first job out of college, and especially in a place where I needed a job so much. I quit. Yeah, 11 months, 12 months in. And I remember just telling myself, like, I don't want to just be in this situation. You know, I can already see myself, like, yeah, maybe I'll be a VP making $300, $400K a year, but, like, I don't that's not the life I want to live. Like, I want to be this big thing.
Right.
You know, and this is, 2012, 13, so like big tech hadn't even, I mean, it was happening, but it hadn't really happened. And I just remember like, oh, like software, like, oh, that dude's 25. He's a billionaire now. Like, shit. Like, I don't know anything about software, or like I thought I knew a little bit about software because that's what I was doing.
Right.
So I draw up a business plan, with part of it is this was a great business opportunity. There was a market opportunity for it. Some of it was this white saviorism, and I needed to have this altruistic business model that was helping people. Some of it was also because I promoted concerts in college. I worked for a guy who really knew what he was doing in that space. Great business experience for me as well. And actually ended up in a lot of cool rooms with a lot of cool people. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to really bring that entertainment piece in as well. So the company started as, again, I quit my job, write this business plan, and basically just tell Jenna, or actually what happened was I reached out to this startup accelerator in LA. Hey, here's my business plan. Here's my pitch deck. I'm fundraising. I'm raising money. No users, no product, no business.
And you had already left your job. Like, you just up and left.
Once I heard back from them, and they didn't invest, but they were like, yeah, you can come work in our space for free.
Okay. In LA.
In LA, which, like, cool. Now I have free work, co-working space to go work in a city that I've only been to a couple times. I don't know anybody there. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, like, I'm just going to go make it happen.
Right.
I'm Scott McElroy.
Right.
I make shit happen. Doesn't matter what it is. Like, there is that part that I look back on with a lot of fondness of like, damn, like 23-year-old Scott had a lot of self-belief.
Right.
He was also naive a little bit, also a little stupid. He just didn't know what he didn't know.
Right.
And again, looking back from an emotional standpoint, the stability that, Jenna and I were creating in Houston, we had a great little place. We were having a family, and family was the most dangerous thing in the world to me.
Right.
Family was the source of all my greatest trauma at that point. So again, I wasn't conscious of that until years later, realizing like, why the fuck did I do that?
Yeah.
But then looking back, it's like, oh, like I really didn't know how to be in that situation like that. So I created this, very stressful, very chaotic situation, which, what started as Echo, EHCO, the Everybody Helping Company, eventually became a company called Everybody Helping, and it was this web platform where, we wanted to be the source for nonprofit donations, because at the time, and still relatively, but at the time, like that market's very fragmented. Mm-hmm. There's no Netflix, there's no Facebook, there's no like owner of that space. Like even to this day, you think to donate, there's not like one mind share. So that was the thought, like be that place.
Right.
And we did some cool things. I think we raised $200,000 from family and friends, like basically a first seed round. And at the time, we actually had a verbal agreement for the biggest check yet. I think it was going to be like $250,000, like a quarter, $250,000. That never materialized. And, eventually me being the founder CEO, like, totally let that collapse in 2015, 2016.
So you are 25 at that time?
25, 26.
25. So I'm just imagining, when I envision like a CEO founder who's got this business and it's falling apart, what immediately comes to my mind is somebody who's in their mid 40s or something, and they've got a little bit more life experience, whatever. At 25, you've worked one job for 11, 12 months. You've got a child. You've experienced what felt like probably some success, what felt pretty good, raising that money, feeling like things are moving in the right direction.
Yes.
It all disappears.
Yes.
How did you manage that experience? I can't even envision what that would feel like. I just knowing myself, I'd be a wreck.
Yeah. Well, and I was.
Yeah.
I was. I mean, and again, like that was kind of the straw on Camel's back to kind of really fail hard. I personally lost a lot of money. like a lot of the investors that we had, many which were like close family friends, they all lost a lot of money. So for it to be very public, or at least for me, that really was this affirmation, this confirming experience of like, oh yeah, I do suck. I'm fucking everything up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fucking everything up, which for me, ultimately led to like not just suicidal ideation, but like, in many ways like a suicidal attempt, which still hurts to kind of name, and realize like, damn, I really was in that place. Like I really did do that. I really was like that close.
Right.
And it wasn't just because my business failed or I'd lost a bunch of money. It was all the stuff.
Everything.
It was because deep down, I like, and this is, entrepreneurs that I work with or young founders that I work with. This is like one of these key tells of how successful you may or may not be, was like, if you need the company to succeed to affirm your identity as a good businessman or a worthy human in general, fuck. Like, you're in for a painful ride no matter what.
Right.
And I needed the business to succeed.
Right.
Because otherwise, who is Scott McElroy? This bastard child who, like, everybody's run away from or abandoned or, like, nobody really likes. Because, like, in my mind, that was a story that I could tell myself. My experiences. And, like all of our shame voices, like, nobody's can get you the way that yours can get you. I've never thought about killing anybody else in my life.
Right.
But when it came to me, it was like, that makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense. Like, and even like acting on that. So, and kind of before it got there, and that was kind of like the 3 or 4 or so months after I really knew, okay, yeah, we're done. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how to navigate this.
Right.
Where effectively as a company operationally, like we're low on cash. Like, we had 5 employees at the time, 2 engineers, 1 designer, and 1 intern. So 4 employees and an intern. Can't pay anybody anymore. And I haven't told them I can't pay them because, as founder, I'm trying to, everything's good, everything's safe. And to investors, it's like, oh, everything's good, everything's great, but I need your money.
Right.
Or the company's going to fail, which is, in most cases, not a good investment to make.
Yeah.
Which, like, shout out to the investors that did make that investment. Good for you. You made a good investment. It was, I just hid from it. Mm-hmm. I remember like talking with Ryan, my guy, and just knowing, okay, I can't move on from this. And, just letting denial and withdrawal set in basically. And really just like, just close my computer, phone on airplane mode, can't email me, can't text me. Like, I'm basically just really denying the truth, which only made matters worse. Because obviously, people are like, what's happening? What's this? Whereas now, I would teach or coach the exact opposite. You
Right.
gotta engage that shit. Yeah, it's gonna hurt, but like obviously pushing it away, like it's not gonna go away, for one, and 2, you're not gonna learn anything by like putting it way over there.
Right.
And yet, it's wild to think like, yeah, I was 25, 26, and like doing the most, like doing the most, which again, like I admire that, like I had the ability to do a lot. Right. Personally and professionally. Like, it was beautiful for the moments that it was beautiful, but also like really sad for the inside of me, or that young Scott who I just needed it. I need the validation. I need my LinkedIn to say founder CEO. I need it to look this way. Like, we had a great brand. Right. Our website looked amazing. Our colors, fonts, the brand, everything looked amazing. Our product, deep down, slightly beneath the curtain, was absolute shit. And at the end of the day, like our business model was absolute shit. Because right. Like, it wasn't about actually building a business that was going to serve this need. It was actually, it was deep down, it was truly about me trying to be something that otherwise, if I don't get, then I'm not worthy. Right? Yeah. I needed to fill that cup because, like, deep down, the cup was empty. So cool, if I put money or title or business or startup, all that in the cup, then I'll be worthy. Then I'll be good enough. Right. And yet, what happens whenever it all crashes down? Then you're at rock fucking bottom. And, you know, similarly, yeah, like if it wasn't for the people that I had around me, everybody that had been in my life to that point, I probably wouldn't have made it.
Yeah. Wow. That was going to be my next question is how did you get out of rock bottom? And before you get into it, I was curious, like, do you feel like there was something you saw as a kid or young adult that gave you some type of growth mindset or mindset that you could do any of this stuff? I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but you also said this was, I think you called it white altruism. Like you thought, I'm doing something good and I can do this because I'm Scott McElroy.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate that between you just actually having that confidence and belief that you could do something special?
Yeah, great question. It's a nuanced answer.
Yeah.
You know, my upbringing in Lufkin is deep East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, very impacted by race, you know, like very divided, very segregated by race.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, you know, I'm the only white kid on the basketball team most of my life.
Right.
And again, like also like subconsciously having, you know, been abandoned and experienced a bunch of trauma, like I was drawn to these communities. Like I was drawn, like these were my friends. And so the one part that like, you know, I can do anything is like also like, you know, if you're familiar with Lufkin athletics at all, like it's a kind of a reputation of excellence.
For sure.
Like, so if I was going to play sports, especially a sport like basketball, which it's not football at Lufkin, but, you know, basketball, baseball, football, you know, it's like you got to know what you're doing.
For sure.
Like that's 5A high school sports. And, you know, that was probably that piece.
Okay.
And in terms of like, you're going to be good because you're going to work. So seeing guys like, you know, Javorsky Lane or Des Bryant or, you know, Max Taylor, Ralph Thomas, Xavier Roberson, Bo Muehlbach, like
some dogs,
pros,
yeah,
like absolute dogs. Like seeing that level of work was like, okay, you can be great, but you have to work your fucking ass off. Which, you know, there was that association.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, did I ever materialize as some like great high school basketball player? Like, no, not really. But there was the self-belief, and you know, even outside of athletics, there was language in terms of like I was charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, like I think probably a lot of that did develop out of fear of being abandoned or fear of not being liked or being rejected by people. But kind of the way that I did develop was like I was able to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I didn't really, at least to my knowledge, have any enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to. Like, one, because in Lufkin, you will get your fucking ass whooped. You know, like just straight up. Like you really would.
Right.
But two, like I wanted to be cool with everybody.
Right.
And to this day, like that is something that allows me to connect with a lot of people. The other side of that is, yeah, like I effectively, I don't necessarily want to just judge myself, but like looking back, it's like I'm a rich white boy in Lufkin, Texas, receiving all of the benefits of being a rich white boy, lots of advantage, lots of privilege. Like, I mean, I can remember showing up to City League basketball with brand new Jordans on, you know, and, you know, shout out to Jacoby Ashworth, him and his mom, Tracy. We were on the same team. But it was terrible. It was trash. Like I was that kid. I was like, I've got brand new Jordans on, but I'm trash. So there was just so much bias and so much, you know, shit that was totally subconscious to me at the time,
mm-hmm.
just because I wasn't aware of it. Doesn't excuse it, but like my experience was like, oh, like I'm, you know, I was raised in a way where the world is laid out for you.
Right.
Some people have to do these things and have this life, and that shit's hard. They got to deal with this and this and this and this and this. You know, like you got pulled over on the way here.
Right.
You know, black man getting pulled over by a police officer, not once have I experienced that.
Right.
You know, and luckily, you know, it was what it was.
He showed
but
love.
Exactly. But like to the same end, there's a ton of experiences that I never had to deal with based on my environment, my upbringing.
Yeah.
To where, oh, the world is laid out for you. It's like, oh, well, I'm gonna go start $100 million company because I can.
Right.
Like, why? What do you mean I can't? So again, like part of it is like, you know, this other piece where I did work. There, like I did study. I did, you know, there were these things, and there are these intangibles that just are about me.
Mm-hmm.
The other part was, you know, maybe the shadow side of my experience, or however you want to describe it, was just this other thing that like led me to be like, life is easy, right?
Yeah.
If that makes sense at all.
Yeah, it does. It's really interesting to hear you frame it that way. I've certainly thought about where that comes from. When I think about my experience, I very much had parents that were like, you can do anything you set your mind to, and frankly came from a similar, not at all a similar town or demographic necessarily, but you know, you lived on the golf course. I lived on the golf course, so to speak. You know, didn't have to want for things. Parents gave me resources. They definitely instilled work ethic, hard work, but you know, the resources were there. So it's just interesting to hear you frame it that way.
Yeah.
But go ahead and continue. So you're rock bottom. You mentioned having the people around you, again, like that showed up as something that helped you climb out of that hole.
Yeah.
But there's got to be more to it.
Yeah, most definitely. I love how you're keeping us on track, because I'm over here taking this on journeys.
It's beautiful.
I love that you brought us back. Yeah, I mean, the way that I really remember it is, I effectively fall into this deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
Business is failing, losing money. I'm about to have to call investors and be like, hey, that money that I told you was gonna double up or triple up, like, it's gone. You know, I had to tell like engineers, like people that I worked with that worked for me, you're not getting paid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I actually owe you 2 checks, but like those checks aren't gonna come. And I'm sorry, but like that's there's nothing that I can do about it. All of that was so overwhelming. I fall into this deep depression, mostly begin just pushing everything away, avoiding it, you know, not getting out of bed type shit. And again, like I'm married,
mm-hmm.
With 2 beautiful children at this point, because
Right.
This is 2016. Hendrix had come along, and I also remember like that was really painful experience as well. We consciously chose to have, you know, Hendrix. There was a little more planning involved in him. Like, we know we're going to be together. We want this. But, like, in my mind, it was like, damn, I got 2 kids. You know, that's a lot.
Right.
In my mind, showing up, it was easy to more, like, naturally show up as a father and be present and do things that, like, I never saw my dad do. But, like, since the lack of that, I wanted to show up and do it.
Right.
But in my mind, oh, man, this is so heavy. I can't deal with this.
Right.
Plus the business, plus everything else. 2016 is also the year that I met... No, 2016 is also the year that I met my biological father for the first time.
Wow.
I had met my biological mom and sister and 2 brothers and grandparents and uncles in 2014 for the first time. So that was another piece in play of like, whoa,
Yeah.
You know, like processing all of that. Eventually this depression at the time, flash forward 2016, you know, it just gets the best of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had a pistol, we had weapons in the house. Like I'd kind of just thought like, you know, like suicidal ideation is an interesting thing in that you're searching for a relief.
Right.
You know, rock bottom is like, get me out of here, but you're helpless to get out of here because you don't know what to do. You don't see the doorways out.
Right.
Like your brain doesn't have a map that says, oh, bro, you just take the left and hit the right.
Right.
You know, like you just go there. And so you search for the most primitive source of relief the brain can generate. Just die.
Right.
You know, like that's heavy.
Crazy.
It's sad, especially considering like that's not just me. That's a reality. We're all facing that right now. And like as far as all the statistics and everything that I'm aware of, like shit's getting worse.
Right.
Really worse. But me personally, like when I was in that moment, went and got that thing. I gave both of my boys a kiss on the head. I don't even think I said anything to my wife. I couldn't look at her in the face.
Right.
I was at that, like, I can't even look at you. You're beautiful, successful. You're better off without me. That's where I was. Hurts to say.
Yeah.
It's not bad though. It's sad, but it's not bad. Because sometimes life, will bring you there. Took a towel with me, so I didn't make a mess. I was just gonna, lean my head on the towel, put the thing in my head, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I was in that moment in my car in Rosedale, like in Austin, like a beautiful neighborhood, like a couple of blocks from our house. And it was actually my mom's voice. Like, I just remember sitting there real silent, like, fuck, I'm about to do this. And I heard my mom's voice. Baby, what are you doing? I'm like, Scotty, stop that.
And this is your biological mother?
No,
or your adopted mother?
My adopted mother.
Okay.
Yes. It's confusing, I know, having two moms, two dads. Yeah, I mean, hell, I'm still like getting used to it, like defining my own language and figuring out what's best. But especially in relation to my mom, at this point, I really refer to just both of them as mom. And then I clarify, I want somebody to ask. Yeah. Because I'll get to that in a second, but just like in that moment, yes, her name was Chris. Mm-hmm. And just hearing that voice, like, baby, what are you doing? And then even at that point, I then heard my brother's voice, my brother Will, who I was raised with. Mm-hmm. He too, and like Will and I are very different people, and we had very different experiences. And mm-hmm. often we butted heads and didn't exactly like get along at times. But I remember in my mind, at that moment in time where I was truly on the brink of collapse, I can remember hearing him in my mind being like, bro, you're being stupid. Like, I don't like you all the time, but I don't want you to do this. Mm-hmm. To where, and then frankly, that thought pattern from my mom to my brother then allowed me some air, especially mentally, to then that led to Jenna's voice or Matt's voice or Parker's voice, of like, and then I was able to like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Which from there, I put the thing away. Yeah. Drove home, like stumbled in the house. I was totally sober, but you'd have thought I was totally inebriated the way that I was. I went upstairs, got in a bath, and, I think right after I took a bath, I'll never forget my son Christian came upstairs. Man, it's a sad memory. I just kind of like, it was like I was shedding a skin. Right. I just like made it through that moment, didn't do it. Rushed up, like taking off all my clothes. I rushed to the bath, like trying to get my body safety. Right. Somatically trying to get warm water, like, maybe being reborn again, going back into some water type of thing. And I think Christian, who was like 4, stumbles up, the stairs into the bath. He's like, Daddy, what are you doing? I'm like, baby, Daddy's sick. I was like, Daddy's sick. I'll be down in a second. And I didn't have any other words for him. Mm-hmm. And it was true. Like I was. And that was a moment too where I basically just kept it real with Jenna and was like, here, take this, put it somewhere where I don't know where it is. And I need help. Yeah. Like not like just very plainly, like I need help. And I had been to therapy too, like frankly, a lot of therapy at this point in my life, from like 19 to 21. But then ended up Lufkin, Houston, and hadn't been back since we got back to Austin. And then at that point, kind of recommitted to that part of my process. Yeah. Yeah.
Had you shared with the therapist you'd seen from those couple of years that you mentioned, did they know where you were at, or were they getting a different story? Were they getting just the, I say just not to discount the level of severity of it, but were they getting the abandonment, story only and not getting the, I don't know if I can manage this anymore, part of the story?
They weren't. So again, there was the stories were different.
Right.
So from 19 to 21, they were getting the honest story of the 19 to 21 story.
Yeah.
But I hadn't seen them for, 4 or so years, 25, 26. So whenever I came back, I mean, yeah, they got the full story.
Mm-hmm.
But there was difference. I mean, even when I started, it's like when you first start therapy or coaching or whatever it is, you're talking and opening up to somebody. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I remember my very first session with Dr. Tori Olds at Deep Eddy Psychotherapy, who's my sensei to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Telling her about my dad and all this stuff, and she was like, but she was probing about that, and me being like, but it's not that, don't worry.
Yeah.
All that trauma I just told you, like, it's not that. And which is not an uncommon thing in therapy, but I didn't know, I didn't know how bad it was.
Right.
And it wasn't until kind of surviving that, close episode where it was like, oh, I'm in this moment and I'm seeing myself through I'm judging myself. A lot of awareness came in that moment. I didn't know everything at that point. But I knew I needed help.
Right.
And yeah, basically recommitted, restarted. At that point it was individual therapy for a little bit. And then Dr. Charlotte Howard, who was my individual therapist at the time, she then led me to a group that I'm still into to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really that group situation that began changing everything.
Okay. The group changed everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Simply because, and this is what's so powerful about group, is you get a lot of different perspectives and you create a lot of safety. I'll never forget this one moment, I'm a couple months in at this time, and I was very kind of pushy and edgy in group, fuck all y'all. You don't know what I've been through, fuck all y'all.
Right.
And eventually, beneath all that defender part, beneath all that kind of fear, there was one moment I basically broke down, started talking about it, and this older man, Charles, in the group, who I hadn't known for a year at that point. I think I'd known him for a couple months at this point. He got up out of his chair and walked over to me and gave me a hug. And I can immediately remember being like, bitch, get the fuck out. Which is that was just the language in my mind.
Right.
But immediately was like, nah, get off me. And he was like, be quiet. I'm not going to leave you here like this,
It's crazy to hear you say that, knowing you now.
Yes.
That you were get off me.
Yeah.
And you would push some sort of love, consoling, whatever the word is, that you would just be like, no.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Correct. Which I'm glad, again, even maybe to kind of slow down a bit, because I feel, we're touching on a lot. Anybody listening, it is heavy. It is a lot. Makes me grateful for you, to give me the platform to share, to speak on it. Because that is one thing about my own life that I appreciate so much is I do love who I am now. I do love what I do. I do love why I do it. I do love how I do it. I do love who I do it with, and that didn't come without these other things,
Absolutely.
And everybody wants this. Nobody wants this. And so that's something that I give, myself, obviously my wife, Jenna, there's no me without her, period. Simply because she was that voice before I was that voice.
And y'all been together since you were what?
We've been together 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
We started dating in the 6th grade. That's a whole other topic, but that invaluable.
Yeah.
Like couldn't be, and also her family. Like, so, in high school, I lived with Matt Gandy. Then I moved in with the Wagners, like, and Jenna's dad, Jenna's mom, like, I stayed with them, and they fed me, took care of me, and every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every holiday since then was all with her family, and so in those moments when you're truly rock bottom, all of that adds up to like, okay, somebody does love me. Somebody doesn't want me to do this thing to hurt me, whether that's, physically hurting yourself or like, mentally, emotionally, smoking, drinking, like whatever else. Like somebody doesn't want me to do this. Circling back to the group situation with Charles, eventually I just let him hug me. And we sat there and cried. And the whole group sat there and cried. And that's another thing that's so beautiful about group is, one person can be grieving or mourning or going through something, and that's going to elicit something in you about your own rock bottom moment. The details are probably going to be different, but the feelings are the exact same. And to be able to see that and resonate with it. And for me, suddenly I wasn't alone. I wasn't totally safe yet because I don't really know y'all motherfuckers, like I just don't.
Right.
But it feels different. Feels kind of good. And then honestly, that was a turning point. Like that specific moment in group, that was a turning point that then allowed me to just like create a lot more emotional safety and internal safety of like, I feel this way because of this and this and this and this. And that makes sense. It makes sense that I would respond that way compared to without that awareness and without those experiences. I feel this way because I'm bad. I feel this way just because I'm broken. I've got baggage. I'm defected. I'm no good. Which I think especially as men is like, that's not uncommon at all. Like, sadly, it's common, I would say.
Right.
Simply because there is that lack of experiential healing of like, oh, like, I just told you all this shit that's supposed to make you hate me or think less of me or want to get away from me or abandon me. And not only are you not doing that, but you're moving closer. It's like, again, at first I was like, that don't make no sense. Like, this isn't safe. Like, I don't trust you. But then with that consistent repetition, you continue to engage that, you shift everything. You basically recalibrate your brain, your body, your heart to like, oh, relationships are supposed to be like this.
Right.
Where they're open and they're safe and they last.
Right.
Even if like I get mad at you or you get mad at me and I don't agree with you, like even if we have a fight, that doesn't mean our relationship's going to end.
Right.
Which like that was another thing that was part of my experience. Oh, if we're raising our voices and like, especially with my own dad, like shit's about to end. Right. So like peace. Yeah. And yet being able to like have the healing experiences that repair that and shift that was really the beginning.
Wow. So you're walking through a ton of healing, learning what things have happened, how they've manifested into your adult life. And ultimately now you're back running your own business, but
not for a while.
Not for a while, right? I mean,
so no. Yeah, not for a while.
How did you go from I just failed miserably in your mind at building a business to, you know what? I can build something. And like you mentioned a second ago, it's, why you do it. You love why you do it. You love what you do. You love who you do it with. How did you build what you do now? And talk more about what it is that you do now. You alluded to it a little bit, but just so the listeners fully understand.
Sure. So first part, like that transition was very slow. That transition was, my wife is probably the best business person or businesswoman I know. She had grown a very successful photography business. She was our breadwinner there was like a 2-year gap, like the depression, like all that for me. Like I was more present with the kids. Like I had no courage or ability or confidence to go out into the world. And so for me, I leaned on her, like, and she was one that was like, you know, looking back, I'm like, damn, baby, you could have left me. Like, you could have done a bunch of things, but that's not her.
Shout out Jenna, man.
Shout out Jenna.
Yeah.
Like, truly. And anybody that really knows me knows that. And I love that. Once that started, I guess once those dominoes started falling in terms of, okay, I'm supported, like I'm safe, like I don't need to go back out to the jungle and like make more, make money or do this, because we were provided for from her. I had the space, which again, like that's a very privileged position. Like that's a very advantaged place to like take time to heal. Like I want everybody to get that.
Right.
Most people have no fucking clue about that. They don't. And even the people that do have it, like run away from it. They resist it. Like it's weird, but that's part of what led me to, one, after being in group for a long time, and not only being able to create a lot of healing for myself, I really developed a presence and an ability to hold space for others. Similarly, that had been done to me, like, being able to reflect and mirror and give to people in group going through their own, like, painful traumas, like trauma, like whatever, like, and again, like, there is, like, capital T trauma, like, violence, rape, like loss, death, like those things. And there's also, like, your dad wasn't present, or your dad abandoned you by never being home, like always being at work, like, or, your mom never really accepting you for who you were, or, so like, just to clarify the word trauma, it's like, it's kind of loaded.
For sure.
But like, everybody has those wounds. They can be super visible in some people's lives, and they can be super hard to see in others, but like their impact is undeniable. Like, I like to think about trauma as like an experience that dictated your behavior. After that happened, you started acting different. You started acting in a different way because you wanted to avoid that pain ever coming back.
Right.
Which is good that our brain does that, but eventually it's like, we can be so like, shit, like I got to stay here in this very small margin to feel safe, which is a tough way to live.
Right.
Like letting all your like past pain like dictate your behavior. One day, Dr. Charlotte Howard was like, you should probably consider being a therapist. Like what you do in here is not normal. You're like, you have a talent here, you have a skill here, which, for me, I remember equating at the time, and still feel this way to this day. It was kind of like LeBron James telling you to go hoop. Like,
you're like, bet.
Like, for me, like, I was like, are you like for real? Like, you think I'm good? Like, and she just continued to affirm and support that. And the more that I just learned about therapy, the more that, like, those veils and stigmas fell for me. Granted, like, therapy and therapists are just like any other job, like, there's great ones and there's less great ones. And fortunately for me, like, shout out Jenna, because Jenna is also the one that led me to Deep Eddy psychotherapy, and Charlotte and Tori and John, and, this, beautiful practice that Jev and Sindor Sykes built since like the 70s.
Wow.
So for me to arrive there was such a community for me to be fostered in a professional sense, that, like, trainings and workshops and so forth. So LeBron tells me to go, hey, you're good at basketball, you should go hoop. I took Charlotte's advice and enrolled at St. Edward's, and I was getting my master's in counseling to become a therapist. I was like, okay, I'm gonna just become a therapist. That's what I'm gonna do. That's who I'm gonna be. And I think I was there for like 8 weeks, and at this point, again, I'm 28 at this point, something like that, 28, 29. And one, I needed money, like, okay, for now sure. I've had time. Now it's time to go. Like, also, you're good now.
Right.
Like, that was then. This is now. Like, there is a level of strength and support and confidence and ability to go out and move forth. And, so yeah, one, I was like, I need money. Two, actually the process of becoming a licensed therapist, and like, for my personal opinion, is like very arduous. You basically have to take 3 years of college, like on the fast end, to get your master's. And then you have to conduct 3,000 hours of supervised hours, which effectively you get paid. You either don't get paid or you get paid like half rate.
Right.
Which wasn't conducive for me. Like, I don't need money. I don't need to start making money in 4 years. Like, I need to start making money now. And like, I want to work with the Scott McElroys of the world.
Right.
Like the high performing, high functioning, like maybe even like there was some toxic masculinity in me for sure. Like maybe even like closer to that era of guy who is like suffering. There's pain there. There's stress. There's anxiety. There's addiction. There's shame. Relationships are probably struggling. Business is probably struggling. Body, etc.
Right.
I want to work with those people. And so I ended up dropping out of St. Ed's and starting my executive coaching practice, which, like is a process of deep inner work and high performance practice, like really dialed in. I've worked with a handful of great female clients, and will continue to for any female client that like approaches me.
Right.
But that's basically how I work with female clients, is they approach me. Otherwise, my heart and my intention is so focused on men need this.
Right.
And like, I am blessed to like be a bit of a surgeon about it. Like, I do get to charge a premium price and work with a specific type of guy who is, having these experiences and wants these outcomes. But that is also very important work. Like, that person deserves healing and growth as much as anyone. And, specifically for leaders, whether that's in business or community at all, like, healing leaders creates leaders.
Right.
Like, companies that I work with or small teams, like that one team leader, the more that they begin to heal themselves, that translates to the whole team on an unspoken level and a spoken level.
Right.
And, so that's a bit about what I do now, which like, so yeah, that was the origin story about, 4 years or so ago. And over time, just like iterating, like, okay, this is how I really want to do what I do. This is, the type of person I want to work with. And, for me, there is like, I work on a retainer basis for 6 months at a time, for a half year or a full year, which was one of the core things for me, because to actually do this work, there must be a long-term commitment, which, like, again, like hearing my story, I love traditional therapy, a huge proponent of it. Go to therapy. Like, if that's what you want to do, go to therapy. There are certain elements of it that I wanted to differentiate from. And one was that this ability to like, oh yeah, you can, go to weekly sessions, but you really can, if you decide that you want to cancel the day before, you just don't go.
Right.
But for me, and the way that I do my business, it's like committing a large payment up front, or, whatever. It's like, you've increased commitment. We're going to work together. I'm going to see you for 24 straight weeks. And this consistency and repetition that you're looking for is, creates a compounding effect. There's a cumulative effect.
Right.
Of this deep inner work of like doing like what I refer to as like the bottom up work. Like, what is in your past? What are the fears? Like, what are the things? What are the traumas? Like, what are the feelings that really need to be addressed, or the top down, from the mind perspective, which that's a lot of the performance practice piece, like getting a meditation practice, a morning routine, an evening routine, these more cognitive things that, are going to create change, but only lasting change whenever they're paired with this like internal work.
Right.
Where like there's a lot of great coaches that do a lot of kind of top down things, mental things, like process things, routine things. And that's great. But in my opinion, those are unsustainable practices without this inside out piece, because ultimately you are going to hit tough moments, and then you're always going to revert to whatever that wounded child inside of you is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whatever their needs are, whatever those behaviors or patterns are. So actually creating space for both, like, and like me, like, again, like loving myself for having the ability to go to both of those places, being able to hold space for, like, you know, big grown strong men crying,
Right.
you know, like the saddest sads, like the fears,
Big sad, big fear.
big sad, you know, like
Yeah.
I use that language a lot,
Yeah.
like, but creating space for them, like big sadness, big fear, big anger, but also like creating these pushes, like, bro, you said you want to do this, but you didn't do that.
Right.
Why not? You know?
Yeah.
And undoubtedly in that situation specifically, there's something internal that's keeping this. Oh, you're afraid to be seen, or you're afraid of rejection. You're afraid of this or this or this. That's cool. Like, we don't have to shame or judge that,
Mm-hmm.
but like, let's acknowledge it, because once we connect with it, then we can do something with it.
Right.
But so many of us as men, just like in my own experience, it was like, talk about that shit, anything but that. I'll start a company and lose a bunch of money, or do, you know, just do anything but that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's so very common, I think, in like our society, specifically for men.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier with coaching specifically, and I was thinking about sports, but also just a coach like yourself, or there's coaches for everything, right?
Yes.
How important is it as a coach that you practice the things that you are coaching these entrepreneurs, athletes, high performers? How important is that you are also implementing those things into your life?
I mean, it's everything. Like having a coach myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, one of my first coaches, the great Julian Rosen,
Yeah.
you know, basically set me off into the world and was like, now become your greatest student, in terms of the things that I'm consistently teaching my clients or connecting with my clients on, you know, making sure that I'm in that foxhole with them, you know, completing these exercises consistently, or like mental emotional exercises, you know, like planning these own routine, like these things, because, you know, one, like there's value in them. So give them to myself, like processes of like reflection and gratitude and communication and so forth. Otherwise, why teach it? Right?
Absolutely.
Like if it's valuable for you, it's going to be valuable for me. And if it's valuable for you, but I'm not doing it, right, there's a disconnect there. So, you know, that's one of the things that I aspire to, and Jenna and I talk about this, and, you know, masters of any craft actually just become great students. Masters are the ones that never stop learning, you know. And there's that ego in me that's like, oh, I'm an expert, I know this, I can psychoanalyze somebody like that, or I can know what your problem is like that, or blah 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 blah. Those are the traps that I can fall into without enough accountability or humility to basically surrender to the craft.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, no, let's continue learning. Like, this is a learning moment. Every human is different. Like, sure, there are some structures that apply to all of us, but, you know, getting into the sauce of what makes you or somebody who they are, like, that's going to look totally different from client to client. So, like, I've got to be in that best position possible to serve them and meet them where they need to be met.
Right. Did you like school?
College?
Yeah. I asked.
I mean, probably not for the right reasons. Not for the reasons you're referring to. Because looking back, we were talking about this at dinner the other night. My Spanish class and my astronomy class, you know, this is at the University of Texas. Like, look, there were so many things that I took for granted that, looking back now, I would go back and be a very different learner,
Mm-hmm.
be a very different student. Like, so I guess the answer is no. Like, did I like school? Like, I really didn't.
It's funny because, to your point, when you've got a craft that you love as you do, it's funny how all of a sudden you are big student. I mean, I could have cared less about economics. I got my degree in econ. But now when it comes to things that I'm interested in, passionate about, I'm like I'm so eager to learn.
Sponge.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I think I heard this on a podcast I was listening to yesterday. It was Chris Williamson. He said, he was talking about how, so many people, whether it's a job or a degree or whatever, they pick something that they don't actually care about for whatever reason, and they're still good at it. But imagine if they cared about it, just how exceptional they could be. Yeah. So it's just funny to think about that now, how the stigma around learning is just different.
It is. Well, and what I think about is from a systemic position or perspective, creating the space for students to find out, instead of this figure it out, take 60 hours of it and it better be the right thing, because I think Jenna got 2 degrees and, obviously took a lot from them, but then started her own business.
Right.
My boy Parker graduated from UT with a degree in chemistry.
I didn't know that.
He runs his real estate business. There's, I wish there was much more space to foster those things as opposed to, what I feel like the institutional experience is, which is there's a lot of pressure involved. There's a lot of money involved, and not that it's not great for what it is. I do very much appreciate it. But there is that almost like a lack of space where I think technology and, the education sphere in general, you can go to YouTube, you can go to different coaches, different teachers, guides, etc., and learn a ton, but in a more non-traditional sense than before. Whereas, who knows? If I was 18 or 17 doing it again, maybe I would have felt like I had more space to just be interested in what I was interested in now. Who knows? Probably not though. Probably not.
Well, Scotty, we're nearing the end, but I always ask people, what is that piece of advice that you leave the audience with, or if you've got a few, what is your thing that you want to leave them with?
Man, the thing that comes to mind first is thank you, listeners who if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Always. None of it is light. I didn't expect it to be like this, but I came ready for anything. So it feels good. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you, bro.
And further for me, all the names that I mentioned, Matt Gandy, Jenna, Parker, Charles, Charlotte, Jackson's in there. There's a lot in there. Thank you. I appreciate you a lot. For me, to the listener, it feels simple, but just keep going, keep going. It's hard when you can't see or when things are slow. But taking just that imperfect action, I might be wrong, but I'm going to take a step. I'm going to do this. That's one thing I give myself a lot of credit for too. I can deal with being wrong. I'm wrong a lot. That helps me become right in things, or, but the thing that, if anything, is just take that step, whatever that scary thing is that you're supposed to do, but you're scared to death of, take whatever small action in that direction to get you closer. Right. That's what comes to mind for me. Just keep going.
Beautiful, bro. And where can listeners find you? Where can they get in touch with you?
ScottMcElroy.co, and Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm sure all the links that will be included in all this.
Yeah.
The walk-on mentality. That's where they can find me.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you so much, brother. Thank you for coming on.
Yes.
And to the listeners, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Walk-On Mentality podcast. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah.